When blood doesn't guarantee love. Surviving family conflict, how I turned pain into strength. I never thought one conversation could change my entire life in a matter of minutes. I was sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee, trying to organize my already crazy routine between work, school, and taking care of the house, when my father uttered the sentence that turned everything upside down. "Samara, you have a sister." My heart raced, my stomach churned, and my head throbbed. Everything I knew about my family, my life, my security seemed to crumble in seconds. My first reaction was to deny it, to laugh nervously, but his serious look told me it wasn't a joke. It was the beginning of a chaos I could never have foreseen. "My name is Samara. I'm 28 years old. I live in Sao Paulo, and I've always been the kind of person who likes to feel in control, even when everything is falling apart inside. I've always fought to be independent, to keep my life organized, and to have a minimally healthy relationship with my family. But suddenly, the entire structure I thought was solid began to crack. Finding out that my father had another daughter out of wedlock made me feel betrayed and deceived, but it also left me angry and with a strange sense of guilt. Because somehow, I felt like I should welcome this news with open arms, as if it were my obligation to welcome someone who had just appeared and messed up my life. Lilian showed up at our house a few days later, accompanied by her mother, Vivian. It was strange to see her there, laughing and trying to be natural, while I felt like screaming, shutting the door, and disappearing. My father seemed to want to make things easier, but I couldn't. Vivian's every gesture, every word, felt manipulative, as if she were testing me. I felt invaded, and my brother Samuel, who had always been more conciliatory, was caught in the middle, trying to please everyone. The tension in the house grew. I felt my chest tighten, my hands sweat, and the feeling of helplessness suffocated me. My own home felt like hostile territory. The following days were a constant struggle between wanting to protect my space and facing the guilt that consumed me. I watched Samuel trying to balance everything, worried about Paula's pregnancy, and I felt trapped in a conflict I didn't ask to experience. Every conversation, every look, every comment about Lilian made me question whether I was being selfish or right to set boundaries. The nights were long and silent, with thoughts running like a turbulent river through my mind. Anger mixed with fear, pain with frustration, and I felt that if I gave in, I would lose my own identity. It was during this period that Diane, my best friend, became my refuge. She didn't judge, she didn't try to solve my problems, she was just there, listening, holding me when everything seemed to be falling apart. With her, I was able to recognize that my struggle wasn't against Lilian or Samuel, but against an emotional system that was draining me, pushing me into roles I never asked for. I began to realize that I needed to set clear boundaries, protect my sanity, but also understand that Lilian, in a way, was also a victim of adult decisions. It was painful, but it was the beginning of the realization that my life could not be defined by the chaos around me. The tension at home reached an unbearable point when my relationship with my father began to fray. Fernando seemed unaware that I was struggling to deal with my own issues and expectations of adulthood, constantly pushing me to accept Lilian as if it were natural. Every time he spoke about family responsibility, I felt a tightness in my chest, a mixture of anger and exhaustion. I wanted to scream, cry, run away, but I felt that any reaction would be interpreted as coldness or ingratitude. Sometimes, at night, lying in bed, I would feel my body trembling, my heart racing, and tears streaming down my face without even realizing it, as I wondered how someone who was supposed to protect me could be the source of so much suffering. Samuel began to distance himself from me, not out of malice, but because he was caught in the crossfire. Paula's pregnancy increased the pressure, and I saw in his eyes a mixture of guilt and fear of making a mistake. Every family gathering, every casual encounter, turned into a silent battle, where misplaced words could trigger emotional outbursts. I felt isolated, tired of trying to mediate feelings that weren't my own. The feeling of being constantly on alert consumed me, and I realized I couldn't continue living like this, waiting for approval or trying to please everyone. My own life was being sacrificed for problems I didn't create. The turning point came when Lilian began to show vulnerability. She wasn't the arrogant girl I'd imagined. She had fears, uncertainties, and also suffered from rejection and abandonment. As much as I wanted to push her away, something inside me began to realize that treating the problem with anger and isolation wouldn't help anyone. I needed to learn to separate my anger at my father and her mother from the empathy I could still have for her. It was a confusing moment. I hated the situation, but I felt compassion at the same time, and that shook me deeply. From then on, I decided I needed to act, but strategically. I began establishing clear rules at home, setting limits on visits, conversations, and interference. It was difficult because each decision was accompanied by guilt, internal pressure, and the feeling of being unfair. But Diane reminded me every day that emotional protection isn't selfish, and that my priorities matter too. Each small step was a test: a firm conversation with my father, a sincere explanation to Samuel, and moments of patience with Lilian. I learned to take a deep breath before responding, to write my thoughts before speaking, to identify manipulation and not react impulsively. The process of rebuilding my emotional life wasn't quick or linear. There were relapses, outbursts of anger, sleepless nights, memories that stung like knives. But with each step, I felt a little more freedom. My body felt lighter, my chest less tight, and my mind could focus on things other than family conflict. I began to realize that even amidst the chaos, it was possible to create space for conscious choices, for selective empathy, and for my own happiness. It was painful, exhausting, but I began to feel that my life could finally be truly mine. Over time, I began to understand that my anger toward my father wouldn't diminish overnight. Fernando had always been someone who manipulated emotions without realizing it, or perhaps even fully consciously, and accepting that he was wrong didn't make what he did any less painful. I found myself spending hours reflecting on every gesture, every word, every silence. My stomach churned with anger and nostalgia, and sometimes my body reacted, with headaches and muscle tension that seemed to never go away. But I realized that running away from these feelings was pointless. I needed to face them head-on, acknowledging the pain and frustration without losing myself. Samuel began to reach out again, but in a different way. He understood that supporting me didn't mean ignoring his own life and Paula's pregnancy. This brought relief, because I felt I was no longer alone. We began to establish clear boundaries for our family, talking openly about expectations, responsibilities, and emotions. The feeling of finally having someone by my side who understood without judgment was comforting. My body relaxed when he was around, and I realized that trust and complicity are built with time, patience, and honesty. Lilian also began to show another side. I realized that behind all her seemingly manipulative behavior lay an insecure and scared girl. When we sat down to talk honestly, I felt a mixture of sadness and hope. She wanted acceptance, but didn't know how to ask for it. I wanted space, but also didn't want to hurt her. Discovering this humanity in her changed my perception of what was right and wrong. It was possible to be firm without being cruel, empathetic without being too open. This lesson was painful because I realized that not everything is black and white, and that responsibility doesn't mean complete personal sacrifice. Diane continued to be my safe haven, reminding me that my emotional sanity is my priority. I began practicing small self-care rituals, walks in the park, writing out thoughts, listening to calming music, meditating a few times a day. Each simple act reconnected me with myself, helped me breathe better, and felt that there was still light, even amidst the chaos. My body responded, less tension in my neck, less chest pain, a feeling of finally taking up my own space. I learned that self-care isn't selfish, it's survival. It was then that I realized that life didn't have to be a constant battleground. With patience, clear boundaries, and a realistic view of the situation, I began to feel emotional freedom for the first time in years. My father was still difficult. Samuel and Paula still dealt with their own challenges, and Lilian still had her insecurities. But I was no longer a hostage to chaos. My heart felt lighter, my nights more peaceful, and my thoughts less anxious. The feeling of being able to look at my own life and make conscious decisions was transformative. For the first time, I felt I could exist for myself, without guilt, without fear. One day I realized I could no longer put off difficult conversations. I sat my father down in the living room and spoke directly about my limits and how much his actions affected me. My body was tense, my palms sweating, but I felt a strength I hadn't known existed. He tried to argue, manipulate, justify, but I stood my ground. I wouldn't be responsible for fixing mistakes that weren't my own. The feeling of getting it all out was strange, a mix of relief and guilt. But at the same time, I felt like I was finally reclaiming my life. My relationship with Lilian also changed. We began meeting at neutral times, without pressure, without our parents' interference. Little by little, I began to realize that she wasn't my enemy, and that she too needed to learn to deal with the pain of her own history. There were still moments of tension, but I managed to be firm without being cruel. This change brought me something I hadn't felt in a long time: genuine empathy without losing my place. My heart ached when I saw her vulnerable, but I also felt proud that she managed to be an adult and balanced even amidst family conflicts. Samuel and Paula became important allies in my reconstruction. We talked at length about our expectations, fears, and limits. Pregnancy brought even more responsibility, but it also brought our family closer in a healthy way, because we realized we can't control others, only our own actions. Feeling I could trust them to share feelings and decisions without judgment gave me the strength to face more difficult days. The physical sensation of constant tension began to diminish, and my body finally allowed itself to relax amidst the chaos that had previously consumed me. I learned to accept that I couldn't control everything, not everyone. Not Fernando, not Vivian, not Lilian, but I could control how I reacted, how I protected myself, and how I chose to live with what hurt me. Each small emotional victory was silently celebrated, saying no without guilt, setting boundaries, talking calmly, acknowledging when I was wrong. Each gesture seemed small, but accumulated, they began to form a solid foundation. The physical sensation was less heaviness in my chest, fewer headaches, fewer sleepless nights. I felt stronger, more centered, and more prepared to deal with real life. Ultimately, I realized that what felt like destruction was actually reconstruction. I didn't have to bear the responsibility for every mistake others made, nor accept emotional manipulation as the norm. My body, mind, and heart began to reorganize. I still felt pain and anger, but they were no longer chains that bound me. They were memories that reminded me of the strength I had built. Looking back, I see that every tear, every scream, every moment of doubt was necessary to get here. And for the first time, I feel I can live my life with conscious choices, self-respect, and genuine empathy. Time brought clarity. Little by little, I realized I didn't need to apologize for wanting to protect my peace. Each step I took toward emotional autonomy made me realize it's okay to distance myself from those who cause suffering, even if they're family. My body reacted with less tension, less tightness in my chest, and my nights began to be more peaceful. I learned that it's possible to feel empathy and still protect yourself, and that loving someone doesn't mean allowing abuse or manipulation. My relationship with Lilian found a balance. We weren't best friends, nor inseparable sisters, but there was respect and understanding. I could be firm, and she could be vulnerable without it hurting me. With Samuel and Paula, we built a safe space where each of us could express our fears and expectations without feeling guilty. Paula's pregnancy ended up bringing everyone closer in a healthy way, because it forced us to look beyond the chaos and realize that our priority was to protect and care for our choices. Diane continued to be my silent rock. She was often the listening ear that reminded me to breathe, not give in to manipulation, and to appreciate my achievements no matter how small. I began investing in myself, hobbies, healthcare, learning new skills, and even short trips to reconnect with my inner self. Each personal achievement was a silent victory, strengthening my self-confidence and reaffirming that I could be happy without depending on anyone's approval. Looking back today, I see that every tear, every argument, and every moment of fear taught me something valuable. The strength we need to protect ourselves comes from within. We don't need to carry the pain of others, nor take on responsibilities that aren't ours. I still deal with parts of the pain, but now I know how to manage them, how to recognize triggers, and how to act consciously. I learned that setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's emotional survival, and that our sanity must come before any family obligations. In the end, what seemed like insurmountable chaos became learning and growth. I was able to transform pain into strength, anger into clarity, and confusion into direction. My life once again had boundaries, choices, and freedom, and I could finally look at myself in the mirror without guilt. There are still challenges, but now I know I can face them with awareness and determination. The feeling of controlling my own destiny, even in the face of a complicated family, is liberating. I learned that it is possible to overcome, even when everything seems to be falling apart, and that overcoming obstacles is, above all, an act of self-love.